Star Trek the original series features the original iconic crew of the Enterprise. But who are they? Hey Trekkies, Christian Fox here with another video for you. Today, I want to talk about the original crew of the USS Enterprise. Whether you're a newly minted Trekkie who's just learning about all of this for the first time, or you're a seasoned fan who just wants a refresher, I am here to help because I am going to break down and explain every single main character in Star Trek the original series, as well as a couple of very important reoccurring ones. Let's get into it. Captain Kirk. Captain James T. Kirk, an Iowa native, is the main protagonist in Star Trek the original series and the original series films. Kirk was originally played by William Shatner and then later played by Chris Pine and is now being played by Paul Wesley. As the title suggests, he is captain of the USS Enterprise, the classic Constitution class in the original series and the refit and Enterprise A in the films. Kirk was briefly promoted to admiral but was then demoted back to captain, which is actually his favorite role. While a skilled diplomat, Kirk is known for getting into battle, whether it be fisticuffs with goons up to no good, evil computers, or beings that just want to blow things up and destroy the galaxy. Kirk has many unique abilities, such as creative solutions to impossible situations, using his own brand of logic against evil computers, and generally being awesome. Kirk is also quite the ladies' man, but that has been exaggerated in pop culture. In universe, Captain Kirk's most famous achievement is probably securing a lasting peace with the Klingons, or possibly beating the Kobayashi Maru, which is an impossible test that all Starfleet cadets have to face, but in pop culture, it's probably his battle with Khan, both in the series and the classic Star Trek film, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Captain Kirk is mentioned in all the series and appears in one of the Next Generation films and also the Star Trek spin-off series, Deep Space Nine. And Kirk also has a son named David who you meet in the TOS films. Mr. Spock. Spock, half human and half Vulcan, was the number 2 lead in Star Trek the original series and the original series films. Spock was played by the late Leonard Nimoy and later by Zachary Quinto, and now he is being played by Ethan Peck. Well, a skilled captain and legendary diplomat, much like his father, Ambassador Sarek, Spock is best known for being a science officer and first officer. Spock was so brilliant that he was almost always able to science living daylights out of any situation and help Kirk and the Enterprise save the day. Spock's signature trait was that he controlled his emotions and operated from logic rather than instinct. Even with that, he often traded sarcastic barbs with Dr. McCoy. Where Kirk fought hand-to-hand, Spock often came up stealthily behind bad guys and knocked them out using his ever-handy Vulcan nerve pinch. Perhaps his greatest achievements were his diplomatic efforts, where he created a lasting peace between the Klingons and Federation, with a little help from Kirk, and unifying Vulcans and Romulans. Spock is mentioned in all the series and appears in The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the J.J. Abrams Trek films, Star Trek Discovery, and now Strange New Worlds. Dr. McCoy. Leonard H. McCoy, aka Bones, a Georgia native, was the Enterprise's chief medical officer in both the original series and in the original series films. McCoy was played by DeForest Kelley in the original series and original series films, and then later played by Carl Urban in the J.J. Abrams reboot series. McCoy, a brilliant doctor, often faced impossible medical situations where patients would be exposed to crazy sci-fi stuff such as alien viruses or life-sucking beings. Although famous for uttering the phrase, "He's dead, Jim," he was crucial in solving a lot of the problems faced by the Enterprise and cured many of the sci-fi diseases. Outside of being a brilliant doctor, McCoy is famous for his curmudgeonly attitude, his love-hate relationship with Spock, where the two would often trade sarcastic barbs with each other, and his fear of transporters. I would also say that McCoy is the moral conscience for Kirk and often serves as the voice of reason. And I also forgot to mention that Dr. McCoy is known for the phrase, "I'm a doctor, not a fill in the blank." McCoy is mentioned in a number of the series and appears in The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Mr. Scott. Montgomery Scott, aka Scotty, a Scotland native, was the chief engineer of the USS Enterprise in the original series and the original series films. Scotty was originally played by James Doohan and then later played by Simon Pegg in the J.J. Abrams reboot films. Scotty was a brilliant engineer that saved the ship in the most impossible situations, such as the time he was able to take a derelict ship and make it functional enough that it allowed Kirk to use it as a bomb. And he was able to do this so much that it actually earned him the nickname the Miracle Worker. Even with his brilliance, Scotty earned the reputation of overestimating the time to complete a task so that he could look even more impressive when completing them early. In pulp culture, he is known for saying some variation of, "I don't have the power," and I really can't do a Scottish accent. Scotty is mentioned in most Trek series and appears in The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and the J.J. Abrams reboot films. Lieutenant Uhura. Nyota Uhura, a Kenyan native, was the communications officer of the USS Enterprise in both the original series and the original series films. Uhura was originally played by the late Nichelle Nichols, then portrayed by Zoe Saldana in the J.J. Abrams reboot films, and is now being played by Salia Rose Gooding in Strange New Worlds. Uhura was a brilliant linguist and communications expert that Kirk often relied on when interacting with difficult species. Not only could Uhura speak a vast number of alien languages, but she also possessed significant technical skill. In one situation, she was able to break through a powerful force field created by a godlike being. In another, she was able to translate the call of an alien probe to allow Kirk and the gang to find a possible solution to the impending destruction of Earth. In pulp culture, Uhura is famous for her phrase, "hailing frequencies open," but more importantly, she is known for being the first person of color on a TV show to be given a role of substance and power and not one of a servant or maid. Her role was so impactful that Martin Luther King himself begged Nichelle to stay on the series and inspired a young Whoopi Goldberg, aka Guinan from Star Trek The Next Generation. Uhura is mentioned in almost all the series and appears in Deep Space Nine, the J.J. Abrams reboot films, and now Strange New Worlds. Mr. Checkov. Pavel Checkov, a Russian native, was the navigator of the USS Enterprise in the original series and the original series films. Checkov was originally played by Walter Koenig and then later played by the late Anton Yelchin in the J.J. Abrams reboot films. Checkov worked in tandem with the helmsman, allowing them to pull off many amazing feats such as getting out of a giant space amoeba after detonating an antimatter bomb. While not often depicted in the original series, Checkov was a genius. This was much better depicted in the J.J. Abrams reboot films, such as his ability to beam up a falling person, and that's when Kirk was falling off of the platform and not Checkov. Although famous for being a navigator, Checkov did sometimes act as science officer, and then was later promoted to the position of chief of security and tactical officer, and then was promoted even higher into the position of first officer. But then, for some reason, he was back to being a navigator, even though he held the position of commander. In universe, he's not only well known for his skills, but also his habit of incorrectly attributing famous things to Russia, such as his belief that Cinderella was a Russian epic. In pulp culture, he is known for being one of the few Russians on film and television during the Cold War who's one of the good guys. Checkov is mentioned in most of the series and appears in DS9, Generations, and the J.J. Abrams reboot films. Mr. Sulu. Hikaru Sulu, a San Francisco native, was the helmsman of the USS Enterprise in both the series and the majority of the original series films. Sulu was originally played by George Takei and then later played by John Cho in the J.J. Abrams reboot series. Sulu was known for his incredible piloting skills and was often responsible for fancy flying when the Enterprise was in crisis. Such moments include the time he had to manually pilot a shuttle into a shuttle bay, or the time he had to hide the Enterprise behind a glass giant in Star Trek 2009. Sulu was rewarded by eventually becoming a captain. Much to Kirk's amazement, Sulu found time to start a family and had a daughter. In universe, Sulu is legendary for his time in Starfleet, and in pulp culture, he is known for being one of the first Asian Americans on television in a positive role, much like Uhura. Takei in his later years has become a gay icon and is known for his phrase, "oh my." And I can't do that justice because I'm not George Takei or Garrett Wang. Sulu is mentioned in most of the series and appears in Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and the J.J. Abrams reboot series. Dr. Chapel. Dr. Christine Chapel, aka Nurse Chapel, an Earth native, was a medical officer aboard the USS Enterprise as Dr. McCoy's head nurse in the original series and the original series films. Well, technically only one, but more on that in a bit. Chapel was originally played by the late Majel Barrett and is now currently being played by Jess Bush in Strange New Worlds. Chapel was a brilliant nurse that often assisted the good doctor with many dangerous surgeries, such as one that involved both Spock and his father Sarek. Outside of surgery, Chapel worked with McCoy to develop cures to many sci-fi illnesses, such as the Theragun derivative that cured the mental insanity caused by inner space as seen in the Tholian web. While Chapel is perhaps most well known for her time as McCoy's head nurse, she was promoted to chief medical officer sometime prior to the motion picture, at least according to the novelization, which of course people debate because some people say it's canon, some people say it isn't. It's a whole thing. But in that novelization, she was promoted to chief medical officer. Chapel was last seen as a commander stationed at Starfleet Command in Star Trek IV The Voyage Home. Chapel didn't get a ton of character development in the original series, but has since gotten a ton in Strange New Worlds as Dr. M. Benga's head nurse. The series explores her time on civilian exchange from the Stedford Morehouse epigenetic project, and also further explores her romantic feelings towards Spock. Jess Bush absolutely nailed her character in Season 1, and I am so excited to see where she goes in Season 2. Dr. Chapel appears in the original series films, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Yeoman Rand. Janice Rand, aka Yeoman Rand, an Earth native, was a Starfleet officer that served aboard the Constitution-class USS Enterprise and the Enterprise refit under the command of Captain Kirk. Rand also served on the USS Excelsior under the command of Captain Sulu. Rand was portrayed by the late Grace Lee Whitney. According to IMDb, Melanie Shatner played her in Star Trek V The Final Frontier, but her placement in that film seems very odd given her rank and position at that time in the series. Rand was prominently featured in the first season of the original series as Kirk's personal yeoman. She appeared in a number of episodes such as Miri, The Corbomite Maneuver, The Balance of Terror, and Charlie X. Rand is also featured in The Enemy Within, but her big scene in that episode is, shall we say, rather problematic. Throughout her time on the series, Rand was shown to be compassionate to others, such as her trying to help the troubled Charlie from Charlie X, and friendly with the rest of the crew. The first season also hinted at Rand and Kirk's mutual attraction to each other. Rand was later promoted to Chief Petty Officer and Transporter Chief in Star Trek The Motion Picture. The Search for Spock and The Voyage Home featured brief cameos of Rand. It is not clear what rank she was in The Search for Spock, but in The Voyage Home, she was a communications officer stationed at Starfleet HQ. Rand was eventually promoted to the rank of commander and served as the Excelsior's communication officer under the command of Captain Sulu, as seen in Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country. Janice Rand appears in the original series, Star Trek The Motion Picture, Star Trek III The Search for Spock, Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country, and Star Trek Voyager. Mr. Kyle. Mr. Kyle, an Earth native, was a Starfleet officer that served on the USS Senzo and more famously on the USS Enterprise, both under Captain Pike in Strange New Worlds and Captain Kirk in the original series and the J.J. Abrams reboot films. Mr. Kyle was originally played by John Watson in the original series and then later voiced by James Doohan in the animated series. Chris Doohan, son of James Doohan, played Kyle in the J.J. Abrams reboot films. Currently, Kyle is being portrayed by Andre Day Kim in Strange New Worlds. Mr. Kyle has the distinction of being one of the few officers that served in all three divisions, Science, Operations, and Command. Kyle appears in many of the original series episodes and often served as Transporter Chief. Throughout the series, Kyle was often crucial in ship-saving shenanigans, such as helping Scotty loosen Val's grip in the Apple and work with Checkov to get the Enterprise out of the giant space amoeba after detonating an antimatter bomb. After his time on the USS Enterprise, Mr. Kyle transferred to the USS Reliant in the Wrath of Khan, where he served as communications officer and was promoted to the rank of commander. Kyle appears in the original series, the J.J. Abrams reboot films, and Strange New Worlds. This is all great, but how do they talk to all those aliens that they encounter? Surely they don't all speak English. Do they?